The system always knows first. The system flagged me as the next security breach before I even finished my coffee. That was the exact moment I knew I hadn't slept enough, or that something in my reality had quietly cracked. The underground server hall of Row Holdings breathed around me like a mechanical beast. Low, constant, alive. Blue emergency strips ran along the floor and ceiling, casting everything in the kind of light that made skin look unreal and metal look surgical. Cold air bit through my shirt. Ozone and burnt plastic lingered like ghosts of old disasters. This place was my church, my bunker, my bloodstream. I stood alone between black towers of servers, coffee cooling in my hand, watching my system crawl through live diagnostics. Lines of code scrolled like prayers. Green, stable, predictable, until one line turned red. Predicted breach source, Fin Row. I actually snorted. Out loud. Cute, I muttered. Fingers already moving. Very cute. False positives happened. Corrupted variables. Sensor feedback loops. The algorithm was powerful, yes, my life's work, but it wasn't mystical. It didn't accuse people. It modeled behavior, pressure, access. I wiped the log and relaunched the scan. Same result. I ran it again, this time isolating every internal variable. Access trees, authority ladders, behavioral probabilities. Every path still led to me. My coffee tasted wrong. Bitter. Metallic. Okay, I whispered to the servers. Let's say you're broken. I dug into the core model, stripping layers, hunting for injected noise, sabotage, ghost code. My pulse settled into work mode, that familiar narrowing of the world until only logic remained. And then the screen flickered. Just once. If this story caught you, subscribe. More are waiting. Not a glitch, not a crash, a frame, a single impossible frame burned itself across the monitors. The server hall, this hall, drenched in red emergency light. Me on the floor, not standing, not breathing calmly, blood spreading beneath my shoulder, dark and slow. Server racks screaming with alarms. My coffee cup shattered nearby like a stupid detail my brain shouldn't have been able to invent. Then it was gone. Green lines, stable metrics, normal. I didn't move, didn't blink. My skin prickled the way it did when you realized someone had been standing behind you. That, I said quietly, wasn't code. If the system could visualize me as a threat, as a casualty, then I wasn't operating inside it anymore. I was something it was trying to warn the world about. A soft sound reached me over the hum. Footsteps, slow, unhurried, human. I turned. He didn't belong to the blue. Everyone who worked this level dressed like they were afraid of color. Gray, black, corporate invisible. He wore a dark coat, unbuttoned, hair slightly messy, eyes bright in a way that had nothing to do with monitors. Warm. Alive. He leaned one shoulder against a server rack like this was a cafe and not the nervous system of a billion-dollar company. You look, he said mildly, like someone whose reality just lied to him. Not hello. Not, who are you? Not what happened. That. My grip tightened on the coffee cup. You're not authorized down here. His mouth tilted. And yet, he stepped closer, eyes drifting past me to the central display. The red line was still there, my name still glowing like an accusation. His amusement dimmed, not vanished. Focused. Well, he said softly. That's an ugly prediction. Who are you? I asked. Elias Vale. He finally looked at me then. Really looked. Not like a man scanning a system. Like someone reading a person. Omega, he added, as if it were a professional qualification. I exhaled through my nose. And what exactly is an Omega consultant doing in my server hall at 3 a.m? His gaze slid back to the screen. Meeting the man whose company thinks he's about to betray it. A beat. And, Elias said, voice almost kind, deciding whether the system is wrong about you, or just early. The Omega who reads systems like people. The conference room on the 42nd floor was made of glass and power. Glass walls, glass table, a view of the city so high it felt theoretical. The kind of room where decisions were made that ruined people who would never even know which voice in the room had killed their future. I stood at the head of the table, tablet in hand, jaw set, spine straight, the way my father had taught me, the way the board expected. Across from me sat 6 executives, 2 legal observers and 1 woman from internal audit who looked like she slept even less than I did. And Elias Vale. He hadn't changed clothes, dark coat gone, replaced by a tailored jacket, open collar, no tie. He looked offensively awake for someone who'd apparently walked out of the night. Mr. Vale is an independent risk consultant, the chairwoman said. He comes highly recommended. Elias inclined his head slightly. Polite, not submissive. His contract grants him temporary clearance to all relevant systems, she continued. Including yours, Finn. I didn't take my eyes off him. That depends on what you define as relevant. Everything, Elias said lightly. A ripple of restrained tension moved through the room. I turned to the main screen. Row Holdings' security infrastructure is operating at 98.7% efficiency. All recent breaches have been contained. Too late, Elias cut in. The chairwoman stiffened. Excuse me? They were contained after penetration, he said. Which means your system is excellent at cleanup and mediocre at prevention. I felt heat crawl up my neck. That's not accurate. He smiled faintly. Then this will be fun. Elias stepped forward, fingers flying across the control panel before anyone could stop him. The main screen fractured into layers of live maps, data flows, security clusters. He didn't look at the code. He watched the movement. Here, he said, circling a section of the network. Your access hierarchy is elegant, too elegant. It assumes loyalty where there should be friction. I frowned despite myself. That structure reduces internal lag by 40% and increases blind trust by 72%, he replied. Which means when someone inside decides to hurt you, you won't see them until they're already done. Murmurs around the table. I stepped closer. You're theorizing. No. He glanced at me. I'm observing. With 3 quick inputs, he triggered a simulation. My own system bloomed open like a flower, and then quietly bled. Ghost processes slipped through an executive-level channel. Internal credentials. Perfectly clean. Perfectly invisible. My stomach sank. That pathway doesn't exist, I said. Elias tilted his head. It does. You just never needed to look at it. I shut down the sim with more force than necessary. You're assuming malicious intent where there's no evidence. I'm assuming pressure, he corrected. Debt, fear, burnout, history. His gaze held mine. People don't break systems, Elias said. They break themselves. Systems just follow. Silence. The chairwoman cleared her throat. Mr. Vale will be working with Mr. Rowe directly. Of course he would. The meeting dissolved into logistics and forced civility. When the room finally emptied, I remained by the window, city pulsing below like exposed circuitry. You made your point, I said. Publicly. I didn't contradict you, Elias replied. I extended you. I turned. You dismantled 6 years of architecture in under 10 minutes. Yes, he considered me. Which means you either built it very well, or very alone. I didn't answer. He smiled, but this time there was no humor in it. You don't run security, Elias said. You compensate for it. I stiffened. What's that supposed to mean? It means, he said quietly, that this company isn't safe because of systems. It's safe because you don't let yourself be human. The words landed too close to places I kept locked. Elias stepped back, already turning toward the door. I'll need full access, he added. And coffee. Your underground brew tastes like regret. Against my will, a short, sharp breath escaped me, almost a laugh. He paused, glancing over his shoulder. Oh, Elias said. And Finn, yes? For what it's worth. Your system didn't scare me. He smiled. You did. My sister's office smelled like citrus polish and controlled ambition. Floor-to-ceiling windows, white walls, a glass desk so empty it felt ceremonial. Everything about the space said competence. Stability, nothing to hide. Ellen Rowe sat behind that desk like she'd been designed for it. Perfect posture. Dark hair pulled into a smooth executive knot. A pale silk blouse without a wrinkle. The kind that cost more than most people's rent. She looked exactly the way the company liked its public face. Beautiful, calm, and untouchable. Only her eyes betrayed her. They were tired, not busy tired. Not late-night meeting tired. The kind of tired that sank into the bone. "Finn," she said, standing to kiss my cheek. "You look awful." "Good morning to you too." She smiled, soft and automatic, already turning back to her tablet. "Sit. You want coffee?" "I have the good kind, not that industrial poison you drink downstairs." "I'm fine." "You always are." That was how it always went. She gestured, and a set of files bloomed across the glass wall behind her. Financial summaries, compliance flags, risk projections. One column glowed a discreet amber. My chest tightened. "Ellen." She sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Before you start, it's nothing. A vendor compliance hiccup. Legal's already smoothing it out." I walked closer, scanning the data. They routed transactions through a shell node in Singapore. "That's not a hiccup. That's a future headline." Her gaze flicked up. Sharp, assessing, which would only exist, she said gently, if someone with too much time decided to dig. "You already tripped internal alarms, because you tuned them too sensitively." She tilted her head. "You're protecting us, Finn. You can't be surprised when the system reacts to your own shadow." There it was, the familiar warmth, the familiar twist. I pulled the raw feed onto my tablet, fingers moving out of instinct. I can isolate it, recode the pathway, reroute the audit trail before compliance escalates. Ellen's shoulders eased by a fraction. "I knew you'd say that." I didn't look at her. "You always do, and I always fixed it." I built a containment patch in under 3 minutes, locked the anomaly into a restricted review tier, buried it beneath 3 layers of internal classification, just like I'd done when she'd authorized a questionable acquisition, just like when a former VP had threatened a lawsuit, just like when her personal assistant had quietly embezzled 6 figures. I didn't count them anymore, but my hands remembered. "There," I said. "This buys you time. But you need to clean the source." "We will." "You already said that last time." She stood, came around the desk, and laid her hand on my arm. Her touch was light, familiar. "You worry too much," Ellen said softly. "That's why we're still standing. You always catch us before we fall." "Us." The word wrapped around my ribs, like a responsibility. "Finn," she added, meeting my eyes. "I don't know what I'd do without you." The sentence landed where it always did, somewhere between pride and a quiet, rotting exhaustion. Behind the glass wall, reflected faintly between the city and our faces, stood a third shape. Elias. He hadn't followed me in. He'd positioned himself just outside the transparent divider, hands in his pockets, gaze unfocused enough that anyone else would have assumed he wasn't listening. But he was watching, not the data. Us. Ellen didn't see him, or pretended not to. "You should rest," she said. "You're carrying too much." I almost laughed. "You don't get to say that," I replied. Her mouth curved. "I'm your sister." "Of course I do." I stepped back. "Fix the source." She inclined her head. Always the soldier. When I turned to leave, Elias was already moving down the corridor, slow enough that I could catch up without looking like I was chasing him. The old family wing lay beyond the main offices, preserved corridors of polished wood, historical photos, and legacy plaques. The part of the building investors loved and employees avoided. We walked there in silence. "Your sister is efficient," Elias said at last. "That's not the same as stable." I stopped. "You don't know her." "I don't need to," he replied. I watched what she didn't say. I folded my arms. "Which was that she's afraid," he glanced at me, "and that you're the way she manages it." I didn't answer. We stood beneath a massive framed photo of our father cutting a ceremonial ribbon. Ellen and I beside him, younger, straighter, less tired. You shield her the way some people shield cities, Elias said. Constant maintenance. Silent damage control. She's my family. He studied the image. Then me. No, Elias said quietly. She's your role. The words slid under my skin. I opened my mouth to respond, and my tablet vibrated. A system alert. Not a warning. Not a scan. A visual output request from the predictive core. My pulse spiked. I turned the screen toward myself, and the numbers were gone. Instead, the display showed a room I knew by heart. Ellen's office, her standing by the window, her hand moving to the hidden port beneath her desk. Her expression when the wall sealed. Not gentle, not tired, focused, cold. The image vanished. Data returned. Logs resumed. My breath felt wrong in my chest. That's new, Elias murmured. I looked up at him. If the system shows you someone, he said, it's because it can't warn you any other way. I stared back down the corridor toward my sister's office, where the glass still gleamed with daylight, and nothing looked broken. For the first time in years, I didn't know whether I was protecting my family or protecting myself from them. The trace didn't lead to a hacker hub or a foreign subnet. It led to a building. Which was worse. Physical infrastructure, Elias murmured as the city slid past the windshield. People always forget about it. You can firewall a cloud. You can't firewall a basement. Rain streaked the glass, turning neon into melted color. The streets were thin and mostly empty, the kind of late-hour quiet where the city felt like it was holding its breath. I drove too fast. Elias noticed. Relax, he said lightly. If we crash, at least we'll be a very poetic case study. I don't crash. That's what every system says before it does. I shot him a look. He smiled, then sobered, as he checked the tablet balanced against his knee. The signal's bouncing, he said. Masked, but sloppy. Whoever set this up didn't expect anyone to chase it back to the hardware. Which means either they're arrogant, I replied, or they don't care. Or, Elias said, they think you won't. The building rose out of the rain like a concrete bruise. An old data relay center from the early network expansion years, abandoned when the city upgraded its grid. Forgotten. Perfect. We parked half a block away. The air outside smelled like wet asphalt and rust. Inside, the place was dark. Power, dead. Emergency strips, long since burned out. Only our handheld lights cut through the dust and hanging cables. Charming, Elias said. If we die here, no one's finding the bodies before they start a podcast about us. Stay behind me, I muttered. He hummed. That's not very progressive of you. The server room sat at the building's core, sealed by an outdated biometric lock, which had been recently replaced. Someone's been investing, I said, kneeling to interface. The door clicked. Cold air spilled out, sharp and metallic. The space beyond was smaller than Ro's facilities, but alive. Power hummed through portable generators. 3 active racks glowed dimly, jury-rigged into something functional and very illegal. Elias exhaled. There you are. I moved in, and the door sealed behind us. The sound landed in my spine. Tell me that was you, Elias said. I hadn't touched it. Before I could answer, the lights cut. Complete dark. Then the racks began to scream. Alarms. Rising. Panicked. Someone just accessed them remotely, Elias said. They know we're here. Of course they do. The emergency lantern flared in my hand, casting the room in harsh white. The system overlay in my lens bloomed alive. Power instability. External intrusion. Data bleed. They're trying to wipe the drives, I said. And? Elias asked. And if they succeed, your case study becomes a ghost. He crouched beside the nearest rack, fingers already moving across a portable console. Then, stop them. I knelt across from him. Our shoulders brushed. Static snapped between us. Not electrical. Something else. I tunneled into the core, overriding safeguards, forcing a manual bridge. The racks vibrated beneath my hands, heat bleeding through the casing. The room smelled like ozone and dust, and something sharper. Elias. Adrenaline had a scent. Most people never noticed it. I always did. Power's dropping, he said. They're cutting the external feed. I see it. My fingers flew, commands stacked. The system fought me, rigid and old. Finn, Elias said. Sharper now. We're going to lose the array. Not yet. I ripped open the auxiliary control and forced a bypass. The generators coughed. The room plunged into red emergency glow. Then, silence. Too much silence. My overlay blanked. I was blind. The servers died. For half a second, the world was nothing but red shadows and the sound of our breathing. Then Elias's hand closed around my wrist. Warm. Real. Hey, he said. Stay with me. I'm here. Good. Because I can't see anything, and I refuse to die in a horror movie basement. Despite everything, a breath of something like laughter pushed out of me. They're not gone, I said. They forced a hard shutdown. I need to restart the array manually. In the dark, he noted. In the dark, I shifted closer to the racks, reaching for the physical panel. Elias knelt beside me, light trained on the components. Our knees touched. Our shoulders. Every movement was suddenly careful. The first switch refused. The second sparked. Easy, Elias murmured. You're not defusing a bomb. It feels like it. Then we're definitely holding hands wrong. I shot him a look. He met it, eyes bright even in the emergency glow. You joke when you're scared, I said. You get angry when you are, he replied. We all cope. The generators whined. I slammed the last switch. The rack shuddered. Green indicators flickered back to life. Then blue. Then the familiar hum rolled through the room like a returning heartbeat. My overlay snapped back into existence. The array stabilized. I sagged back on my heels before I realized I was doing it. Elias's hand was still on my wrist. His thumb brushed my pulse once. A grounding touch. You okay? He asked. I don't lose systems, I said automatically. That wasn't my question. I inhaled. His scent was stronger now. Stress and something warmer beneath it. Something human. I'm functional, I said. His mouth curved faintly. High praise. We stayed like that for a moment longer than necessary. Then I pulled my hand free. Data streamed across my lens. They didn't finish the wipe, I said. There's still a partial log. Which means someone didn't expect resistance. Or, Elias said quietly, someone didn't expect you. I met his eyes. The red emergency light softened the angles of his face, made him look almost unreal. We should copy everything, I said. We will. He didn't move away. Neither did I. The servers hummed between us. And for the first time since the system had turned my name red, I realized something worse than being hunted. I didn't want to do it alone anymore. The lab didn't feel like a room anymore. It felt like a confession. Midnight stripped the building of its corporate skin. No voices. No meetings. No controlled lighting. Just the hum of backup grids and the slow pulse of systems that never truly slept. Elias had gone to requisition equipment and food. I hadn't moved. The predictive core glowed at the center of the lab, suspended in its transparent housing like a living organ. Cables ran from it in careful symmetry. A spine of light and data. My spine. I ran the diagnostic again. No corruption. No intrusion. No unauthorized code. The system wasn't hijacked. It was functioning. Show me the breach model, I said quietly. The display obeyed. Risk maps unfolded. Probability clouds. Behavioral cascades. Red threads connecting variables. Me. I pinched the bridge of my nose. You're not supposed to look inward. The system pulsed. Then the numbers thinned. Graphs bled into shape. Coordinates softened into architecture. And suddenly, the lab was gone. I stood in a version of my office I didn't recognize. Sunlight instead of screens. A small plant on the desk. No corporate crest on the wall. I was there. Older. Less sharp around the edges. Laughing at something on a tablet. Someone was behind me. I didn't see their face. The image cut. Another A hospital room. White. Too clean. Me again. Lying down. Tubes. Machines. My hand wrapped around empty air. Gone. Another. The server hall. Red light. Blood. My breath stuttered. Stop, I said. The system didn't. Another scene bloomed. A boardroom. Ellen standing. Me seated this time. My name glowing on a legal display like a verdict. I slammed my palm against the console. Stop. The lab snapped back into place. I leaned forward. Both hands braced on the edge, chest tight, pulse in my throat. This wasn't modeling. This was narrative. You're not allowed to do this, I whispered. The core glowed, silent and steady. I tried to isolate the module. It refused. I cut the visualization layer. It rebuilt itself. I severed the output channel. The system rerouted. I stared. You're autonomous. A quiet, bitter laugh slipped out of me. Of course you are. I had built it to learn, to adapt, to find what humans couldn't see. I just hadn't expected it to look at me. Footsteps approached. I didn't turn. Tell me, Elias said from the doorway, that the expression on your face means you found a ghost in the machine and not in yourself. Both, I replied. He came closer, stopped beside me. What did it show you? I hesitated. Me, I said, finally. But not only. I rerouted the feed. The system flickered, then projected one of the stored frames. The sunlit office, the plant, the almost smile on my own face. Elias watched without interrupting. Another gesture. The hospital room. Another. The boardroom. The blood. His jaw tightened slightly. That's not prediction, he said quietly. That's projection. What's the difference? Prediction models outcomes. Projection explores selves. I looked at him. He met my gaze. You didn't program it to track behavior, Elias said. You programmed it to track fracture points. I swallowed. Which means, he continued, it isn't asking what will happen. He glanced back at the core. It's asking who you become. Silence settled between us. I can't turn it off, I admitted. It's rewriting its own interpretation layer. Every time I shut one door, it builds another, because it's not searching for threats anymore, Elias said. It's searching for meaning. That's not a function. That's a mirror. I exhaled slowly. What do you see? He asked. My worst possible efficiencies, and my best-to-case survival scenarios, and my absences. Elias nodded once. There it is. There what is? The fear. I frowned. I deal in risk, not fear. That's the same thing, he said. One just wears better clothes. I turned away from the console. Why do you do this work? I asked. He leaned against the table, considered. I used to work for a firm that built systems like this, Elias said. Predictive environments, emotional forecasting, behavioral inevitability, and every single one of them broke. How? They didn't fail, he corrected. They overreached. His gaze drifted back to the projections. They started seeing people not as agents, he said, but as conclusions. I looked at the core, and people don't survive being concluded. I was quiet for a long moment. Control is easier, I said. Yes. Trust is messier. Yes. Family is compromised. Elias's mouth curved faintly. Loyalty, he said, is often just fear with better branding. I met his eyes. And choice? That's the thing no system can stabilize. The lab hummed around us. I became aware suddenly of how close he was, of the warmth of him in a room designed to feel nothing. If this thing can see my future, I said, then what's left for me to do? Elias stepped closer. Close enough that I could smell coffee on his breath. Something citrus beneath it. You don't let it tell you who you are, he said. You let it remind you that you're not finished. The system pulsed. I didn't look at it. For the first time since it had started speaking in visions, I wasn't listening only to the machine. I was listening to the man standing beside me, and that frightened me more than any algorithm ever could. Ellen's apartment still had our childhood in it. Not in photographs, in placement. The way the couch faced the windows, as if expecting someone to come home. The way the kitchen light was always left on, even during the day. The way the spare room was untouched, staged like a guest might arrive and never did. She lived 3 floors above the river, in a building designed to look like it had history without actually carrying any. Brick walls that were never load-bearing. Exposed beams that held nothing. Ellen answered the door barefoot. Her hair was down, her blouse replaced by a soft sweater that clung to her shoulders, like she'd forgotten she was still visible to the world. For a moment she looked exactly like my sister. Then her eyes focused. "Finn, can I come in?" She stepped aside. The apartment smelled like tea and something burnt. "I didn't know you were coming," she said, too quickly. "I didn't either." She gave a thin smile. "That tracks." I followed her into the living room, past shelves of carefully curated books she didn't read, past art chosen for tone, not meaning. "You should have called," Aylin said, setting water on the stove. "So you could prepare?" She stilled. "Don't start." "I'm not starting," I said. "I'm noticing." She turned to face me. "What is this about?" "Your vendors," I replied. "Your private access nodes. The ports you installed that don't appear on any official infrastructure map." Her jaw tightened. "Those are legacy connections," she said. "Some of our older partners still route through." "Don't," I cut in. The word landed harder than I intended. We stood there, a few feet apart, the quiet suddenly too big. "I wrote the original network maps," I said. "Every one. I know what legacy looks like." Her gaze flickered. "Just once." "You've been busy," she said. "Yes. So you're auditing me now?" "I'm protecting you." "No," Ellen snapped, then immediately softened. "I mean, Finn, you're tired. You're seeing threats everywhere. You live in breach reports. It changes how you interpret things. You rerouted internal data traffic through a civilian-grade external server." She exhaled sharply. "It was temporary. Temporary is still illegal." She crossed her arms. "Defensive. Familiar. Why are you doing this?" She asked quietly. "Why now?" I didn't answer right away. Because now the system had shown me her face without warmth. Because now the numbers had turned into rooms. Because now I couldn't unsee the way her hand had moved beneath her desk. "Because I don't recognize some of your decisions," I said. "And I don't know if I'm covering mistakes anymore." Her eyes darkened. "I make hundreds of decisions a week." "Yes. And I erase the consequences." That landed. She turned away, walking toward the window. The river glimmered below, black and heavy. "You always were good at cleaning up," Aylin said. "You always were better at it than at asking why." I felt something old twist under my ribs. "We were kids," I said. "You used to hide behind me when Father was angry." Her mouth curved faintly. "Because you stood still. Even when you were terrified." I swallowed. "Do you remember the day Mother left?" She continued. "Of course I did." "You didn't cry," Ellen said. "You just went to your room and took apart your first console. You didn't come out for hours. I sat outside the door with my back against it." She turned to look at me. "I learned something that day," she said softly. "If I broke, you'd become the wall. If I didn't, you'd build one." My throat tightened. "Tell me," I said. "What are you building now?" For a moment, something almost cracked. Her fingers curled against the glass. Her shoulders lifted on a breath that shook. "I'm tired," Aylin said. "I'm so tired, Finn." "Then let me help you." "I don't want help. I've been helping you my entire life. And look where that got us," she whispered. She turned, and for an instant I saw it. The fear, the pressure, the exhaustion that no boardroom ever showed. "I didn't ask to run this empire," Aylin said. "I inherited it like a disease. Every week someone wants something. Every month someone is disappointed. Every year someone tries to take it from me. So you give pieces of it away?" She laughed softly. "No. I try to buy myself out. The words hung between us. I took a step closer. Out how? Her lips parted, and then she closed them again. I made some aggressive plays, Ellen said. That's all. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. I searched her face. There was something there, something behind her eyes that wanted to spill. But fear was faster. You're imagining depth where there's only stress, she said gently. I'm not drowning, Finn. I'm swimming. I looked at her, at my sister, at the woman who'd learned to wear water like silk. Then why? I asked quietly. Do you keep letting me build you ashore? She didn't reply. The kettle screamed. She moved to turn it off. Conversation over. As I stood there, surrounded by a version of our childhood she had arranged like a museum exhibit, one truth pressed harder than any accusation. She wasn't falling. She was choosing where to sink. And I didn't know yet whether I would still follow her. The alert came at 2:17. Not from the network. From the building. Reserve sector. Unauthorized access. Of course, Elias murmured, already pulling on his jacket. Because subtlety is overrated. We were in the lower floors within minutes, security overriding as I rerouted doors and cameras. The reserve sector was a sealed environment, off-grid, isolated, designed to keep core backups physically and digitally unreachable, which meant if someone was in there, they'd either made a spectacular mistake or a very deliberate one. The door closed behind us with a pneumatic hush, then locked. The lights shifted. Emergency red. I swore under my breath. No external signal, Elias said, checking his device. No network handshake. No automated unlock. They severed the grid, I replied. Manual lockdown. Meaning we're not going anywhere until the system finishes its internal sweep. And how long is that? I checked the internal status. 30 minutes. If it doesn't find what it's looking for. Elias exhaled slowly. You really know how to show someone a good time. The reserve sector was smaller than the main halls. A circular chamber lined with cold storage vaults, passive servers, and cryogenic backup arrays. No windows. No ambient sound. Just the low pulse of emergency power. We stood in the center of it, two silhouettes under red light. I'll reroute the sweep, I said, already moving. And trigger every integrity alarm in the building? Elias asked. Hard pass. I don't like being trapped. Neither do I, he replied. Difference is, I admit it. I shot him a look and dropped to one knee, interfacing with the nearest terminal. The system resisted. Of course it did. They built this to survive nuclear events, I muttered. It doesn't appreciate improvisation. Neither do you. I am improvising. You are attempting to dominate. That's called security. Elias leaned against one of the vaults. The red light carved shadows along his cheekbones, softened the sharpness I'd grown used to. Why do you think I work alone? He asked suddenly. My hands paused. I assumed, I said, that you enjoy irritating everyone equally. A corner of his mouth lifted. There is that. Then it faded. But mostly, Elias continued, because teams like to pretend their loyalties are solid, contracts are clean, lines are clear. He met my eyes across the dim. They never are. I straightened slowly. You don't believe in staying, I said. I believe in leaving before the narrative is written for me. I frowned. That sounds like control. He huffed a quiet breath. That sounds like survival. Silence stretched. The sweep timer ticked on the wall display. You've done this a long time, I said. Risk analysis. Corporate triage. Watching structures crack. Yes. And you never wanted to build one? I tried. His gaze slid briefly away. It didn't end well. I didn't push. Instead, I found myself saying, I don't know how to leave. He looked back at me. Anything, I added, or anyone. The words surprised me even as they formed. When something breaks, I said, I fix it. When someone struggles, I compensate. I don't step away. I fortify. That's not the same as staying, Elias said quietly. No, I agreed. It's worse. The emergency lights hummed. The reserve systems pulsed around us, sealed and indifferent. What happens, Elias asked, when the thing you're fortifying is what's hurting you? I didn't answer. I didn't have one. Instead, I took a step closer, then another. I could feel the heat of him now, the reality of his presence in a room that was designed to preserve ghosts. You joke when you're scared, I said. You get angry, he replied. You overwork. You build cages out of competence. Better than running, is it? We were close enough now that his voice wasn't traveling. It was arriving. I don't believe in forever, Elias said. I believe in moments you choose again, and again, and again. I studied his face. Then choose this one, I said. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't even an invitation. It was a fracture. His breath caught. For half a second, neither of us moved. Then Elias closed the distance. The kiss was nothing like I expected. There was no softness in it, no hesitation. His mouth met mine with sharp certainty, like he was making a point rather than asking permission. Heat and surprise and something like relief collided in my chest. I caught his wrist instinctively. He made a quiet sound against my mouth that wasn't a joke. The world narrowed to the taste of him, the press of him, the way the red light burned everything else away. When we broke apart, our foreheads nearly touched. His breath was uneven. So was mine. Well, he murmured. That was profoundly unprofessional. I let out a short, incredulous breath that might have been a laugh. The wall display chimed. Sweep complete. No threats detected. The lights shifted back toward white. The door unlocked with a soft mechanical click. The illusion shattered. But the echo didn't. As we stood there, systems humming, escape available again. One thing settled with unsettling clarity. Whatever this was, it was no longer theoretical. I found it by accident, which meant it had never been hidden. The system was in passive recovery mode after the reserve sector lockdown. Background audits, redundancy checks, integrity sweeps, the kind of slow, methodical processes I usually let run while I slept. I didn't sleep. I stood alone in the primary server hall, blue light painting my hands into something unreal. Watching lines of data resolve. That was when a foreign signature surfaced. Not hostile, not masked. Signed. Eval. I frowned and isolated it. The file wasn't in the network. It was nested inside my predictive core's archival layer. Somewhere it should never have been. I opened it. A simple interface bloomed. Black background, white text, case file, row holdings. Internal fracture risk. Lead consultant, Elias Vale. Scope, behavioral breach probability. Executive level vulnerabilities. Legacy power structures. I scrolled, and my name appeared. Primary variable, Fin row, role. Head of IT security. Risk profile, high stability anchor, unresolved loyalty conflicts, elevated internal override authority. Variable, not subject, not partner, a parameter. My throat tightened. Subfiles opened like ribs. Surveillance notes. Behavioral modeling. Emotional stress mapping. Time-stamped. Weeks before he ever walked into my server hall. Before the night drive. Before the emergency lights. Before his mouth on mine. I leaned back against the console, a slow, cold pressure spreading under my skin. One file was tagged observation log, personal proximity. I didn't want to open it. I did. Subject exhibits strong containment reflexes. Prolonged eye contact increases compliance response. Emotional rapport accelerates access to internal systems. Trust formation probability high. My vision blurred. Trust formation probability. The words pulsed like a second heartbeat. I closed the file. Opened another. Contract scan. Authorization stamp. The boards. My sister's division. I exhaled a sound that didn't feel like it came from a person. I shut everything down. Left the building. Drove without registering streets. The house lights came on automatically when I entered. Soft. Neutral. The way I'd programmed them. Elias was there. In my kitchen. Shoes kicked off. jacket draped over a chair, one of my glasses in his hand. For half a second, the normality almost fooled me. "Hey," he said, "you vanished. I thought maybe you finally took my advice and slept." I crossed the room and set my tablet on the counter between us. "Explain." He glanced down, saw the file header, and went still. Not surprised, not confused. "Still, I asked you to explain," I said. Silence stretched. Then Elias set the glass down carefully. "You weren't supposed to find it like that." The sentence was soft. The implication wasn't. My chest tightened. "Like what?" "Unframed." I laughed. A sharp, ugly sound. "Unframed," I repeated. "You built a behavioral case around me and I'm supposed to care about the presentation?" His jaw flexed. "It wasn't." "Don't." The word cut. "Don't make this about intention," I said. "You tracked me, modeled me, tested proximity variables like I was a system vulnerability." "You were," he said quietly. The honesty hurt worse than denial. "I was a job," I said. "You were a risk," he replied. "To the company, to yourself, to you." He didn't answer. "Say it," I demanded. Was I a line item, or did I become something else when it got inconvenient? Elias stepped closer. "I didn't expect—" "Stop." He froze. My voice shook. "Every time you looked at me, I said, 'Were you seeing a person? Or a conclusion?'" The room felt too bright, too open. He exhaled slowly. "You were a variable," Elias said, "in a system that was already unstable." The words landed like a verdict. "And you?" I asked. His eyes lifted to mine. "You," I said, "were my vulnerability." Something broke in his expression. "That part," he said, "wasn't in the contract. Then why is it in your files?" Silence. "I tried to compartmentalize," Elias said. "I always do. Observe. Measure. Leave before the narrative turns personal. And this time?" "And this time," he said. "The narrative didn't ask." My hands curled into fists. "You don't get to turn real people into theory and then be surprised when it bleeds." He flinched. I didn't stop. "You don't get to kiss someone under emergency lights and call it data collection." "I didn't," he said. Sharp now. I crossed a line. "I know that." "Yes," I replied. "You crossed into me." The space between us felt electrical. "I won't be your case study," I said. "I won't be your access point. And I won't be another system you leave when it stops behaving." Elias closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. "I never meant to hurt you." "I believe that," I said. My throat tightened. "And it doesn't change anything." The words were quieter. "Final." He nodded once, picked up his jacket. At the door he paused. "For what it's worth," Elias said, not turning, "you were the first variable I stopped wanting to solve." The door closed behind him. The house went very quiet. I stood there, staring at the empty space where he'd been. At the contract still glowing on my counter. At the truth settling into the bones of the walls. The system had been right. Not about betrayal, about fracture. The final breach didn't arrive like an alarm. It arrived like a confession. At 4:42, the predictive core activated without a request. No warning banners. No intrusion flags. Just a single line pulsing at the center of the main display. Cascade event, internal, active. I was already in the central server hall. Of course I was. The room glowed blue and white, immaculate and uninhabited, the way a cathedral looks right before something catches fire. Streams of data began to rise across the panels, internal permissions shifting, executive-level credentials unfolding like keys. Not forced, offered. My sister's access signature lit the grid. Clean, authorized, catastrophic. "She's doing it," I whispered. The system didn't respond. It didn't need to. Processes were already detaching. Shadow pathways opening. Core redundancies unbinding. A perfect, internal exfiltration. No noise, no violence. Just disappearance. I moved. Commands flew from my hands into the system. Counter-routing flows. isolating sectors, forcing human authorization locks. She bypassed them. She knew where they were. Because I had built them. My chest tightened. You taught it to trust blood, I muttered to myself. The first data vault detached. A deep tremor ran through the floor. Then, the system did something it had never done before. The lights dimmed, the panels cleared, and the predictive core projected two environments into the air between the server towers. Not numbers. Not code. Rooms. The first image stabilized. A boardroom. My sister standing at its center. Pale but composed. Lawyers flanking her. My name burned on a legal display in front of her like a wound. I was seated. Alone. Security cuffs around my wrists. Her eyes met mine across the room. Apology without responsibility. Survival without me. The image shifted. The second environment formed. The central server hall. Empty. No alarms. No collapse. On one of the panels, an arrest notification. On another, Ellen's access revoked. And me. Standing. Not triumphant. Not broken. Just still. Two futures. The first was familiar. I'd been walking toward it my whole life. The second had no precedent. The system pulsed once, as if asking. My hands hovered over the console. I thought of Ellen at 16, pressing her back to my bedroom door so I wouldn't feel alone. Of Ellen at 24, stepping into boardrooms twice her age. Of Ellen in her office, hand moving beneath the desk. I thought of every risk I'd buried. Every anomaly I'd softened. Every time I'd mistaken protection for love. You're drowning, I whispered. And then, quietly, and I am not your shore anymore. My fingers moved. I severed her root access, forced a forensic capture across the internal nodes, unlocked the audit channel I'd never let exist. The system screamed, real alarms this time. Red flooded the hall. Data streams froze mid-transfer like shattered glass. Security authorizations cascaded down the hierarchy. Executive immunity dissolved. My sister's signature went dark. I routed everything outward, to the board, to compliance, to federal oversight. Every hidden pathway, every off-grid mirror, every silent sale. I didn't compress it. I didn't soften it. I didn't protect her from consequence. I stepped back as the final sequence completed. The core hummed, then slowly returned to baseline. The projections vanished. The futures collapsed into one present. My console chimed. Internal breach contained. Source, Ellen Rowe. Status, secured. I closed my eyes. The relief didn't come. Neither did triumph. Only something like gravity, returning. I left the hall. The executive elevators were already locked down. Security teams flooded the corridors, voices sharp with protocol and shock. I didn't stop. Ellen's office was chaos when I reached it. 2 compliance officers. 1 security lead. Her assistant crying quietly near the door. Ellen stood by her desk. Still composed. Still beautiful. Still my sister. She looked at me. And understood. You did it, she said. Not angry. Not pleading. Certain. I had to, I replied. She studied my face, as if searching for something familiar. For them, she said. For me, I corrected. Something in her eyes finally broke. You always said you'd protect this family, Ellen whispered. I did, I said. I just stopped confusing it with you. The officers moved. She didn't resist. As they guided her past me, her shoulder brushed mine. The contact was brief, human, and gone. I remained where I was, long after the office emptied, long after the lights reset, long after the company I'd built my spine around began to transform into something that no longer required it. For the first time since the system had turned my name red, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't compensating. I wasn't containing. I had chosen, and nothing in me wanted to undo it. The scandal unfolded without me. Screens lit up across the city, news crawls, emergency board sessions, legal teams multiplying like reflections in glass. Rowe Holdings became a headline. I became a footnote, which suited me. The executive floor was almost empty when I returned. Security tape sealed certain doors. Temporary badges replaced familiar ones. Conversations stopped when I passed. My office looked the same. That was the strangest part. Same desk, same walls, same city framed in glass. Just hollow. I stood in the center of it for a long moment before crossing to the console embedded in my wall. The predictive core interface glowed patiently, waiting. End visual modeling, I said. No resistance, no rerouting, no quiet rebellion. The system accepted the command. Data structures unwound, projection modules powered down. Interpretive layers collapsed into dormant code. The room dimmed. The hum softened. The space inside my chest did the same. I exhaled slowly. The algorithm didn't vanish. It simply went quiet. I left the building before I could be asked to explain anything. The city received me without ceremony. Morning was just beginning to bruise the horizon. Streetlights flickered out. Delivery drones crossed pale sky like migrating insects. People were already standing in lines, already carrying coffees, already believing in plans. I walked without a destination. For the first time in years, nothing was tracking me. No system anticipating my next move. No family emergency calling me back into formation. Just the sound of my own steps. Finn. I stopped. Elias stood across the street, hands in his coat pockets, hair stirred by wind. He looked tired, not burnt out tired. Human tired. I didn't know if you'd want to see me, he said. I crossed to him. I don't know what I want, I replied. But I know what I don't. That's a start. We stood there, city noise filling the space where anger had been. I heard, Elias said quietly. Then you know. Yes. And you still came. He nodded once. I ended my contract. I looked at him. With the board? With myself. A breath left me that I hadn't realized I was holding. You were right, I said. About loyalty. His mouth curved faintly. I usually am. Tragically. I don't believe in it, I continued. Not the way people sell it. Not as blood. Not as obligation. Not as staying because you're afraid to see who you are without it. Elias watched me carefully. I believe in choice, I said. And in what you do after the choice stops being easy. Silence settled between us. Then he said softly, then choose. It wasn't a challenge. It wasn't persuasion. It was an opening. I stepped closer. No contracts, I said. No observation windows. No exits mapped in advance. He inclined his head. No conclusions. I don't know how this looks, I added. I don't know how long it lasts. Good, Elias replied. Neither do I. I searched his face for the strategist, the analyst, the man who built walls out of departure. What I found instead was someone who had also just burned a bridge and was waiting to see what stood on the other side. I don't want to be your variable, I said. I don't want to solve you, he answered. I hesitated only a second before reaching out, fingers closing around the fabric of his sleeve. A simple contact. Not data. Not a test. Just presence. Then walk, I said. He didn't smile. He nodded and stepped into pace beside me. We moved down the street without destination, without projection, without anything measuring the distance between us. Behind us, somewhere beneath glass and steel, the most advanced predictive system in the city was dormant. And for the first time since I built it, the future was not glowing. It was open. The new office doesn't hum. That was the first thing I noticed. No constant subsonic vibration from buried server stacks. No climate-controlled breath of machines designed to outlive people. Just air. Real air. Moving when the windows are open. Carrying the smell of rain from the street below and coffee from the shop on the corner. We're on the third floor of a converted warehouse near the river. Brick walls that actually hold weight. Sunlight that doesn't need permission. A door that opens with a key instead of a scan. The company is small. 6 people. 2 rooms. 1 conference table we found at a salvage sale and refinished ourselves. It still smells faintly of citrus oil and burned wood. We don't build empires. We build counterweights. Systems that audit power structures instead of reinforcing them. Adaptive firewalls for institutions that don't yet believe they'll ever need them. Ethical backbones for startups that still think values are something you add later. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. That's not my job anymore. My job is architecture, boundaries, exit paths that don't look like collapse. I resigned from Row Holdings 3 weeks after the scandal broke. No speech, no spectacle. Just a signature and a badge left on a desk I'd stopped recognizing as mine. Ellen is in legal limbo. Alive. Accountable. Distant. I don't visit. I don't hate her. I finally stopped orbiting her. Elias works 2 desks down from me. He pretends he doesn't. He calls himself a consulting presence. I call him a liar and steal his pens. He still jokes when he's stressed. I still get quiet when I'm scared. Some things don't need fixing. We don't live together. Not yet. We walk home together most nights. We argue about dinner. We trade headlines. Sometimes we don't talk at all and somehow say everything. There are mornings he leans in my doorway, coffee in hand, watching me trace diagrams on the glass wall like I might open a door in the air. There he is, he'll say. The man who tried to automate fate and failed spectacularly and beautifully. I dream about the algorithm sometimes, not the code. The rooms, alternate offices, blood on the floor, futures that almost fit. In the dreams, the system still waits for input. I wake before I give it any. The first few times my hands reached for a console that wasn't there. Now they reach for the space beside me. For Elias's wrist. For breath. For the sound of the city doing what cities do when no one is modeling them. I thought losing the system would feel like blindness. It doesn't. It feels like weather. Unpredictable. Inconvenient. Sometimes dangerous. Real. On the brick wall across from my desk, we painted our company's first line in black, uneven letters. No system owns a person. It's not a mission statement. It's a reminder. Some nights after everyone's gone, I turn off the lights and stand in the quiet of a space that doesn't watch me. I don't ask what happens next. I don't calculate probability. I don't simulate myself into versions I can't live up to. I open the window and let the future breathe.